So by 1850, the Barnum Museum was really a center of entertainment and the cultural center of New York in many ways. And it's interesting because you think about the 1850s and everybody says, oh, yeah, well, what about all of the major political controversies leading towards the Civil War? That certainly was out there. But if you're looking at the day-to-day experience of the working class people, this was the sort of, particularly working class men, this was the center of everything. I mean, this is where people went to be entertained. This is where people spent their money. And they knew they were getting ripped off in many cases. There was a guy called the Brick Man, and he would start about a block away from the Barnum Museum, and he would basically put one brick down. He had basically three bricks in his hands, and he would put a brick down, and then he would pick up the brick behind him, and he would put it in front of him, and he would walk to the next brick. And he wouldn't say anything, and people would ask him what he was doing, and he would basically generate a crowd because people would say, "Hey, you got to go see the Brick Man," in front of the museum, and he would bring you all the way into the lobby of the museum, and he would continue to bring you all the way. And so you had to buy a ticket, and of course people would buy the ticket, and then the Brick Man would bring you in, and then he would turn around at the end. He would say, "I've got to go back and get a whole other group of people coming because now you guys have all paid. You're ready to go to the museum." And so this was basically, it was a scam, and you were scammed before you even entered into the museum. And of course, the reaction most people had is they thought it was hilarious. And they told everyone else to go see the Brick Man. So P.T. Barnum was building on his own scam and getting other people to scam each other in order to see these displays like the Fiji Mermaid, or like Tom Thumb, or like Joyce Heth, who was an African-American woman who claimed to be George Washington's wet nurse, and she had raised him from a little boy, and she told all these stories about George Washington, and people loved it. And there were all these different things. There was an advertisement about a man-eating chicken. And everyone's like, "Oh, man-eating chicken, it's going to be this huge chicken." And you go into this room, and there'd be a man, eating chicken. And again, people were sort of buying the hype, buying the advertising that Barnum was putting out there. So this is interesting because if you look at the cultural patterns here, right, Barnum is going to start setting up the way that modern American entertainment works. And if you think about this, right, the idea that what's good is what sells and popular verdicts is really important. What rating does something have? The consumers voting for outcomes is a very important aspect. So the whole idea of if people buy it, it's good. And what's good is what sells. And this is very much about this is the Barnum idea of and then creating buzz around a product too. So the idea of consumer communities is also interest, so that when you've had this experience, you can talk about it with other people. You can compare this to any form of kind of modern TikTok video or maybe a concert that you go to, but this idea of common experience as being the source of connection between people. Now, the whole other idea here is people knew that Barnum's entertainment was mindless and didn't have any redeeming value. But there is a suggestion that it does because everybody else is doing it, therefore there must be something good about it. And the other thing about this culture is it's very much defined by young people. So youth culture, this is sort of one of the first examples of urban youth culture really coming to dominate the way that Americans think about what's good and what isn't. So if you want to think of examples of this, I would suggest that P.T. Barnum informs American Idol. If you think about how American Idol works, particularly in the later stages, people vote for who the best singer is. And again, it's all about phoning in or tweeting, or that there's going to be a connection between the audience and the competition. If you look at professional wrestling, staged competitions, this whole idea of creating a spectacle for the sake of getting people to buy tickets. Everybody knows it's a scam, but they're kind of in on it together. And this is another good example of it. The Biggest Loser, again, looking at people who are morbidly obese, who sort of represent the kind of the Barnum freak show, and you participate in this in some way. And I think The Bachelor is another great example of this, creating fake competitions, which are by virtue of all of the media surrounding it, whether it's the TV networks that are are advertising it, all of the product placement around it, but these everybody realizes uh, these are events staged for the purposes of consumption. And this is exactly what P.T. Barnum sets up as a cultural model from the very beginning. So what I would have you do is think of other examples of this. I asked you to come up with 5 examples. If you are thinking about this, I would make a list of them and put them in the classroom comments section of this assignment in Classroom, or you can send me an email with them. But think about this, the ways in which you find these things still at play in the culture that you're part of, the youth culture, that either the online culture or the larger commercial culture that you guys are all familiar with. So think about it, tell me what you think, and look forward to hearing your thoughts.